The message that shook his world. Morning sun slid through the tall glass windows of Sundar Pichai's minimalist office, casting long shadows on the polished floor. Everything looked perfect, neat, organized, exactly how he liked it. His assistant had just dropped off a fresh cup of chai, his favorite blend from India. The calendar on his desk was filled with back-to-back meetings, each more important than the last. A new AI prototype was being launched. Stockholders were anxious. Engineers were nervous. The pressure was, as always, immense. Sundar sat still for a moment, fingers tapping lightly on the wooden edge of his desk. He wasn't thinking about numbers or deadlines. Instead, his mind wandered to something he hadn't done in weeks: take a walk with his family in the park. His children's laughter echoed faintly in his head, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to smile, but that moment of peace didn't last. His phone buzzed on the desk. Not the official one linked to Google's internal systems, but his old personal phone, the one he rarely used anymore. It only rang when someone from the past needed something, or when he was home and wanted to scroll quietly through old memories. But now it buzzed again, a single message from an unknown number. Do you remember me? I need your help. Please call me back. 917 asterisk asterisk asterisk. He stared at it. There was no name, no details, just a quiet plea. There was something deeply unsettling about the message. It wasn't just the mystery, it was the tone, the desperation, as if someone had swallowed their pride just to send it. Sundar tilted his head slightly and read the message again. Do you remember me? He couldn't place the number. But something stirred inside him, not fear, not even curiosity. It felt more like a weight being dropped on his chest. Whoever this was, it mattered. He set the phone down and picked up his tea. Warm and smooth, but now tasteless. The words kept circling his mind like a song you couldn't forget. Do you remember me? He tried to push it away, dove into his morning meeting with the head of Google Brain. But even as charts and predictions flashed across the screen, he found himself reaching into his pocket, fingers grazing the phone. Again and again. By noon, he gave in. He shut his laptop, looked at his assistant, and said, "I need 5 minutes." She nodded, surprised but understanding. Sundar stepped into a quiet hallway, his footsteps echoing against the white marble walls. He dialed the number. 1 ring. 2 rings. 3. On the 4th ring, someone picked up. A sharp breath. Then silence. He almost hung up. But before he could speak, a voice came through. Soft, older, fragile. "I didn't think you'd call." Sundar froze. He knew that voice. Faint, distant. But it triggered a memory dusty and buried. "Who is this?" he asked, more gently than he expected. The voice trembled. "It's me, Ramesh." Ramesh. Sundar's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't heard that name in decades. The name belonged to a boy with crooked glasses and a shy laugh. But he used to sit under the mango tree behind the school and dream about building machines. Ramesh was the first friend he made when he moved from Chennai to a new city. A time when Sundar barely spoke and felt invisible. Ramesh made him feel seen. "Ramesh?" Sundar whispered, "How?" But the voice cut him off. "I wouldn't have reached out if it wasn't serious. I'm sorry to do this to you. I know you're someone now, but I didn't know who else to call." A strange lump formed in Sundar's throat. He leaned against the wall. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I'm in New York, at Street Nary's, the hospital." "It's not for me. It's for my daughter." Sundar's mind raced. Hospital, daughter, his old friend. What had happened? "She has a heart condition. Doctors said there's a procedure, experimental, not covered by insurance. I tried everything. Sold my car. Maxed out every card. I even went to a loan shark. Nothing worked. And then I remembered you." Sundar closed his eyes. He imagined that quiet boy again, Ramesh sharing a single textbook between them, helping him with his science project, giving him his lunch when Sundar forgot his. He remembered the day Sundar got into and Ramesh didn't. They promised to keep in touch. But life, as always, moved on. Sundar went to the States. Ramesh stayed behind. And now After all these years, how old is she? Sundar asked. Double quotes, 10 double quotes. The word hit him hard. Same age as his own daughter. There was a pause. A long, heavy pause. The kind that stretches time. I'm not asking for a favor, Ramesh said quietly. I'll pay you back, whatever it takes. I just needed to ask. Sundar didn't respond right away. His voice caught in his throat. Money wasn't the issue. He could wire the funds in seconds. But this wasn't about money. This was about something else. About a door from the past. Creaking open. About a bond he never knew still mattered. About a memory that refused to be forgotten. Text me the hospital details, Sundar said at last. I'll call you back soon. He hung up. But his hands were trembling. He stood there for a long time, heart pounding against his ribs. How did things get to this point? What happened to Ramesh after school? Why had he never reached out before? And why now? Sundar walked back into his office, but he wasn't the same. The room looked different now. The world felt heavier. He opened his laptop. Cancelled the rest of his meetings for the day. A message popped up from a senior executive. Confused. Sundar ignored it. Instead, he sat at his desk and stared at a blank page. He began typing an email to the finance team, but even as he did, the questions wouldn't stop. Was this a scam? What if it wasn't Ramesh at all? Had someone used his old friend's name to get to him? He hated that thought, but it was the world he lived in. Too many fake stories, too many people pretending. But that voice, it was real. Too real. He picked up the phone again and called his head of security, told him to check the number. Trace it, verify it. If it was real, he wanted to know everything about Ramesh, the hospital, the daughter. He wasn't going to risk getting played, but in his gut, he knew it was real. It was Ramesh, and he was drowning. Sundar leaned back in his chair, looking out at the San Francisco skyline. He had climbed every mountain, built a tech empire, sat in rooms with presidents and visionaries. Yet none of that prepared him for a simple text. From a forgotten friend. Whose life now hung in the balance. And deep inside, something began to shift, because sometimes the past doesn't stay in the past. Sometimes it calls you. And everything changes. Cliffhanger for part 1. As Sundar prepares to fly to New York the next morning, his head of security calls him back and says something that stops him cold. Sir, we found something. And you're not going to believe who Ramesh really is now. The hidden truth. Moment Sundar heard the words, you're not going to believe who Ramesh really is now. A strange chill spread through his body. He held the phone tighter, his voice steady but urgent. What do you mean? Sundar asked, his throat suddenly dry. On the other end, his head of security, Rajiv, hesitated. Rajiv wasn't the type to be dramatic. He'd worked closely with Sundar for years, known for his discipline, discretion, and deep respect for facts. So, when he said something was unbelievable, it meant things were about to get serious. We ran the number. Rajiv said it does belong to a man named Ramesh. The address and identity checkout. He's been living in Queens, New York for the past 14 years. Works as a night shift janitor at a local manufacturing plant. Single father. No criminal record. Everything looks normal on the surface. But there's something strange. Sundar leaned forward in his chair, heart thudding. Go on. He used to be an engineer. A very gifted one. Published several white papers in his 20s. Worked with a small but promising AI firm back in Chennai before it collapsed during the recession. After that, he disappeared. No digital trail, no LinkedIn, no articles. It's like he vanished. Until he popped up in New York under a new job title, maintenance staff. Sundar's eyebrows furrowed. Ramesh had always been brilliant. Smarter than Sundar in some ways. Back in school, he could solve physics problems in his head. Sketch circuit. Diagrams from memory. And explain complex ideas using pebbles and sticks. Sundar had always wondered why someone that gifted never made it further. But now, the silence of all those years made sense. Life must have crushed him slowly, one unpaid bill, one rejected opportunity at a time. Rajiv continued. We also found a hospital record. His daughter, Tara Iyer, 10 years old. She was admitted 2 weeks ago with a congenital heart defect. She needs an advanced surgical procedure within the next 10 days. After that, the doctors say her survival chances drop significantly. There was a pause, a heavy one. Sundar stared at the floor. He imagined a small girl lying in a sterile hospital room, tubes running through her fragile body, unaware of what the next week could bring. And beside her, Ramesh, the boy who once shared his lunch, now a man fighting to keep his daughter alive. Book me a flight, Sundar said quietly. Tonight. Rajiv agreed without question. Within 2 hours, Sundar was on his private jet. Heading to New York, no press, no cameras, no entourage. Just him, a backpack, and a heart full of questions. As the city lights came into view below, his thoughts raced. Why hadn't Ramesh ever reached out sooner? Why didn't he ask for help when things started to fall apart? And most of all, what had Sundar missed all these years? The car ride from the airport to Queens was quiet. The city buzzed around him, honking horns, flickering signs, steam rising from manholes. But Sundar sat still, his hands folded in his lap, staring out the window at lives being lived behind windows and sidewalks. When the car finally pulled up outside the hospital, it was past midnight. Sundar stepped out wearing a simple hoodie and jeans, blending into the quiet darkness. He didn't want to be recognized. This wasn't about Google. This was personal. He entered through the side entrance Rajiv had arranged, nodded at a nurse who recognized the name on the list, and followed the signs to the pediatric cardiac wing. Room 312. He paused outside the door. His heart pounded harder than they had during any product launch or board meeting. He took a breath and knocked gently. The door creaked open, and there he was. Ramesh. His hair was thinner now, touched with gray. He wore an oversized sweatshirt and sat in a chair beside a hospital bed, holding a little girl's hand. His eyes were sunken with exhaustion, but the moment he saw Sundar, something lit up inside them, a mix of disbelief, gratitude, and shame. You came? Ramesh whispered, standing slowly. Sundar stepped in and looked at the girl. Her skin was pale, lips slightly blue, wires connected to machines that beeped softly in the background. She looked peaceful, too peaceful, like she was trying not to disturb the world with her pain. Sundar reached out and took Ramesh's hand. Of course I came, he said gently. They both stood there for a moment, years of silence collapsing in a single breath. I didn't know who else to turn to, Ramesh finally said, his voice breaking. I tried everything. You should have called me years ago, Sundar replied, emotion rising in his throat. I was ashamed, Ramesh admitted. You became someone. I was just a janitor. Sundar shook his head. You were never just a janitor. You were the boy who taught me to dream, who gave me courage when I had none. You were my first friend. Tears welled in Ramesh's eyes. Sundar looked around the room. It was small, dimly lit, the paint peeling slightly from the walls. On the bedside table was a drawing crayons on cheap paper. It showed a girl holding hands with a man in a cape. Underneath, the name Tara was scribbled. That's her favorite superhero, Ramesh said quietly. She says he saves people with his heart. Sundar smiled faintly. Then he turned to Ramesh. How much is the surgery? $162,000. I raised 20. Sundar didn't hesitate. I'll cover it. All of it. Ramesh stared at him, speechless. His mouth opened, but no words came out, just tears. Thick, silent tears streaming down a face that had clearly forgotten how to cry. You don't owe me anything, Sundar said softly. This isn't about debt. It's about love, about remembering who we were and who we still are. That night, Sundar stayed with them. He sat beside Tara's bed while Ramesh slept in the chair. He listened to the beeps of the machines. He watched her chest rise and fall, fragile and determined. And for the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't felt in Keck world, a sense of pure, quiet purpose. But just as dawn began to rise outside the hospital windows, Sundar's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message from Ramesh. It was from Rajiv. Sir, we found something else. About the company Ramesh worked for before it shut down. I think he may have invented something that was stolen. Sundar stared at the screen, stunned. He looked over at Ramesh, sleeping in the corner like a man who hadn't rested in years. And in that moment, a deeper mystery began to unfold. This wasn't just about a heart surgery anymore. It was about the past, about betrayal, and about a brilliant mind that may have been buried, not by accident, but by design. Asterisk buried code, stolen dreams. Quiet hum of the hospital faded into the background as Sundar stared at the screen of his phone. Rajiv's message sat there like a ticking clock. He tapped to open the attached file and began scrolling through the documents, each one more unsettling than the last. What started as a gesture of help had now turned into something far bigger. A hidden chapter from the past. One that had been buried under years of silence and struggle. The file was labeled Project Antares, Proprietary, LGORTHM Analysis. As Sundar scanned through the report, a chill ran down his spine. The name Antares triggered a distant memory. It was the name of an AI concept he and Ramesh used to talk about in college, back when their dreams were more idealistic than practical. They'd once spent a whole night scribbling equations on a hostile wall, trying to build a system that could predict and enhance human decision-making. Ramesh had come up with a model, an early prototype of recursive adaptive learning that was light years ahead of anything available back then. And now, it was here. Only it wasn't credited to Ramesh. The file stated that the algorithm had been acquired by a private firm named Archon Technologies in 2007 after their merger with a struggling Indian startup. That struggling startup, according to Rajiv's research, was the same AI firm where Ramesh had worked until it collapsed. Arcon Technologies no longer existed under that name. It had rebranded a decade ago. Today, the world knew it as Cerebro One, of the top AI companies in the world, second only to Google's DeepMind. The sick feeling in Sundar's stomach deepened. And then came the final blow. The chief architect of Cerebra's current learning system, the same system that had revolutionized logistics, personalized medicine, and predictive analytics across the globe, was someone Sundar had known for years. Nathan Cross. Nathan had been a brash but brilliant software engineer in Silicon Valley during the early 2010s. He had risen fast through the ranks and was now one of the most influential voices in artificial intelligence. They'd met several times at conferences and even collaborated on a joint tech initiative once. Nathan was charming, persuasive, and now possibly a thief. Sundar's head spun. He rose from his chair, pacing the small hospital room while Tara slept peacefully and Ramesh dozed in the corner. Each step felt heavier as the gravity of what he'd just uncovered began to settle. This wasn't just about helping an old friend anymore. This was about justice. About truth. About stolen legacy. He thought back to those dusty college classrooms, the chalk-stained blackboards, the excited arguments over equations, the way Ramesh's mind worked like a puzzle that solved. He remembered one specific day they were both 19 when Ramesh had said, "We won't just build AI. We'll build something that understands why people make choices, something that sees deeper." That something was now running half the modern world. But Ramesh's name had been erased from it. Sundar pulled out his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard as he sent a direct message to Rajiv. "Get me everything you can on the merger. I want emails, logs, witness testimonies, anything connecting Nathan to the acquisition of Ramesh's code." Within minutes, Rajiv replied, "Already working on it. But, Sundar, if this is true and you go public, it could blow up the whole industry." Sundar paused. He knew Rajiv was right. This wasn't some obscure patent dispute. This was foundational. If it turned out that Cerebra's core technology was built on stolen work, it could cause market tremors, investor panic, even lawsuits spanning continents. And if Nathan was exposed, it would send shockwaves through the entire Silicon Valley ecosystem. But none of that mattered. Not to Sundar, not when he saw the truth. He turned back toward Ramesh, still asleep. The lines on his face were deeper now, his body smaller, as if the weight of life had slowly chipped away at him. And yet, in that frail figure, Sundar saw a giant. A mind that had once reached for the stars and been pulled back to earth by betrayal. How many Rameshes were out there? How many geniuses had been silenced because they lacked connections, power, or money? Sundar sat back down quietly. He stared at Tara again, her small chest rising and falling, her innocence untouched by the complexity of the world. He made a silent vow. He would not just save this girl, he would restore her father's name. He would right a wrong that had gone unspoken for far too long. As dawn broke over the city. Hospital windows bathed in gold. Sundar got up and made a call to his personal legal advisor. Priya Menon. She answered gradually. Sundar, is everything okay? I need you to meet me in New York, he said. Today. Why? What's going on? We may be about to take down the second largest AI firm on the planet. There was silence. Are you serious? Dead serious? He paused. And Priya, this isn't about business. This is personal. Later that morning, while Ramesh went down to the cafeteria to get breakfast, Sundar finally sat alone with Tara. She blinked awake, eyes groggy but bright. Her smile was small but sincere. You're the man from the TV, she said softly, her voice barely louder than a whisper. Sundar chuckled, moved by the innocence in her tone. I guess I am. Asterisk, are you my daddy's friend? He nodded. I am. And I'm very lucky to be. She looked up at the ceiling. He tells me stories about when he was young, how he wanted to build machines. But he says life doesn't always let you build things. Sundar leaned closer. Sometimes life does let you. But it takes longer than we hope. Tara looked at him seriously. Will I be okay? Sundar hesitated, then took her hand gently. Yes, he said. You will. I promise? Just then, Ramesh returned with a tray of food, stopping short when he saw them. Sundar stood up. I need to go handle something today, but I'll be back. You've already done more than enough, Ramesh said, his voice laced with emotion. Not yet, Sundar replied. Not even close. As he stepped out of the room, the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on his shoulders. Exposing Nathan Cross, challenging Cerebra, and reclaiming Ramesh's legacy. There would be pushback, threats, maybe even legal retaliation, but Sundar wasn't afraid because some battles weren't about money or reputation. Some were about truth, and he was ready. Asterisk. The email that changed everything to ride across New York was slow, heavy with silence, and yet Sundar's mind moved at lightning speed. He sat in the back of a black SUV, watching the city pass by in a blur, while his phone buzzed again. Another message from Rajiv. He clicked it open. We found the original thread. It's all here. Timestamps, metadata, even backup logs. Nathan? Cross knew? He took Ramesh's code, renamed it, and presented it as his own within 3 weeks of that acquisition. I'm forwarding everything now. You need to see this. Sundar's chest tightened. This was it, the smoking gun, the final piece of the puzzle. Everything he had felt in his gut since stepping foot in that hospital room had just turned into undeniable truth. The email thread began on a rainy day in April 2007. For a top level, executives from Archon Technologies had been discussing the assets acquired from the small Indian startup. Most of the code had been written in broken English, and the formatting was primitive, but there was one file they couldn't ignore. R-algorithm V2.7, one of the engineers had flagged it as brilliant, but underdeveloped. The first reply was, from Nathan, it's not underdeveloped, it's raw genius. This recursive learning method is years ahead of anything we have. If we clean it up, rename it, and push it as proprietary architecture, We can use it as the foundation for our next platform. Another executive replied, but it's not ours. Nathan answered with 6 words that made Sundar's stomach turn. Bury the origin. No one will ever know. Beneath it, a digital signature, dated, authenticated, undeniable. Sundar scrolled. Slowly, heart heavy. This wasn't just theft. This was a deliberate erasure. Ramesh's name removed from the code base. Comments in the algorithm replaced. File timestamps altered. The strategy was surgical, and it had worked out for 16 years. The world had believed Nathan Cross was the mastermind behind Cerebra's legendary platform. But now the truth sat in Sundar's hands. He looked out the window again, visibly, slowing as they approached the law offices of Priya Menon. It was a sleek glass building nestled between 2 older brownstones. Discreet, powerful, everything Priya stood for. She was already waiting for him in the lobby, tablet in hand, expression focused. I've seen the files, she said as they shook hands. This is bigger than anything we've heard. They took the elevator up in silence. Inside the private conference room, Priya laid out a plan. Her voice was clear, unwavering, but also cautious. We're talking about opening a case of intellectual property theft that could destabilize a global company. She began. And not just any company, one with heavy political ties and a stock valuation in the hundreds of billions. We need to proceed with precision. Sundar nodded. I don't care about the backlash. I want to give Ramesh his name back. Priya looked at him carefully. That may take more than just a lawsuit. He'll need to testify. And that means exposing himself to media scrutiny. He's been living in the shadows. Is he ready for that? Sundar hesitated. Was Ramesh ready? The man he saw last night had seemed tired, worn down, a father clinging to hope by the threads of his daughter's heartbeat. He had already sacrificed everything. Was there enough left in him to fight? Still, Sundar had to try. I'll talk to him, he said. But first, we make sure he has protection. Financially, legally, physically. Priya nodded. Already done. I've arranged full legal representation for him and Tara. And I've got a media consultant on standby in case this gets leaked. The rest of the meeting was a blur of paperwork and strategy. But as the hours passed, a new fire began to burn inside Sundar. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about taking down Nathan Dot. It was about reclaiming what was. Stolen Dot, about rewriting the story that should have been told 16 years ago. Dot later that evening. Sundar returned to the hospital. He found Ramesh standing by the vending machine, looking smaller than ever, a coffee cup trembling in his hand. Hey, Sundar said softly. Ramesh looked up. You're back. I found something, Sundar said. We need to talk. They walked out to a quiet bench in the hospital garden, the city skyline glowing behind them. Sundar pulled out his tablet and handed it to Ramesh. Read this. Ramesh scrolled. Slowly, carefully. Dot at first. He said nothing. But Sundar watched his eyes. He saw the moment Ramesh recognized the file name, the line of code he'd written in college, the structure he drafted on a chalkboard 2 decades ago. Dot. And then he saw the message from Nathan. Bury the origin. No one will ever know. Ramesh's hands fell to his lap. The tablet slid beside him, and he just sat there, broken. I thought I was crazy, he whispered. I remember showing that prototype to our manager before the company folded. He dismissed it, said it was worthless. And then just like that, everything collapsed. I thought maybe it really wasn't good enough. That maybe I wasn't good enough. His voice cracked. But it wasn't me. They took it. Sundar placed a hand on his shoulder. They did. And we're going to fix it. Ramesh shook his head. It's too late. No, Sundar said firmly. It's not. He paused. I have the best legal team in the country, ready to fight for you. But I can't do this without you, Ramesh. You have to stand up. You have to speak. Ramesh looked away, hands clenched. I'm just a janitor. No, Sundar said, his voice rising. You're not. You're the man who built a system that changed the world. They tried to bury you, but you're still here. And now you have something more powerful than code. You have the truth. Ramesh closed his eyes. For a long time, he didn't speak, and then, quietly, he said, "What about Tara? I can't lose her. I can't risk anything." Sundar nodded. "You won't? I've already arranged the surgery. It's scheduled for tomorrow. She'll be okay." Ramesh looked up, eyes wet with disbelief. "You did that?" "I did," Sundar said, "because she deserves a future. And so do you." A long silence settled between them, broken only by the rustle of trees. Finally, Ramesh stood. "Okay," he said. "I'll fight. Not for me, for her." And in that moment, Sundar saw the boy he once knew, the dreamer, the inventor, the fighter stand, tall once more. But just as they turned to head back inside, Sundar's phone buzzed again. Another message from Rajiv. This one was different. Someone leaked the files. Cerebra knows, and they're already preparing a counterattack. They just filed a cease and desist against Ramesh for defamation and theft of company property. Sundar's eyes widened. It had begun. The war for truth was no longer quiet. Asterisk. The witness in the shadows. Hospital walls felt colder the next morning. Everything had changed in the span of 24 hours. Sundar Pichai, once just a visitor to a quiet pediatric ward, now stood at the edge of a corporate war. A war that threatened not only reputations and fortunes, but truth itself. He paced silently in the hallway, outside Tara's room as the surgical team prepped her for the operation. Inside, Ramesh sat by his daughter's side, holding her small hand and whispering soft words of encouragement she might never remember, but would always carry in her heart. Sundar watched them through the glass, a strange mix of hope and fury. Building in his chest, his phone buzzed again. The mysterious email from the previous night remained unread. But now there was a second message from the same anonymous sender. "The truth is deeper than you think. Cerebra didn't just steal code, they buried people. Meet me at the old Lexicon Cafe in Brooklyn. 2 p.m. Come alone. No name, no signature. Just the location and time." Sundar tapped the original email open once more. It had been sent from a throwaway account, but the writing was clear, crisp, too precise to be random. "I worked with Nathan Cross at Archon. I saw the transfer logs. I saw the internal memos. I even warned legal, but they silenced me. I have documents Nathan thought he destroyed, and recordings, lots of them. It wasn't just about code, it was about control. They knew Ramesh's system could change everything, and they hijacked it before anyone outside the company could notice." Sundar stood frozen. Recordings, memos, proof that couldn't be erased. He made a decision right there, without hesitation. He looked toward Tara's room one last time. She was being wheeled into surgery now, her small frame disappearing behind sliding double doors. Ramesh followed, nerves etched across his face. Sundar signaled to him briefly, mouthing, "I'll be back." Ramesh nodded silently, trusting him with more than words. By the time Sundar arrived at Lexicon Cafe, the Brooklyn sky had clouded over, casting long gray shadows across the sidewalks. The cafe was old dusty windows, faded brick walls, a flickering sign above the door that barely clung to life. This was not a place someone like Sundar Pichai was expected to walk into. And yet, here he was wearing a plain jacket, baseball cap low, sunglasses covering tired eyes. Inside, the air smelled of old books and bitter coffee. A single barista stood behind the counter, humming softly to herself. 3 patrons sat scattered around, their faces buried in laptops or newspapers. Then Sundar saw him, a man in his mid-40s, hunched at a corner table, nursing a black coffee, thin, pale, with a nervous twitch in his right hand. His eyes darted to Sundar the moment he entered, and a tiny nod followed. Sundar approached slowly. "You're the one who emailed me?" The man nodded again. "Name's Elliot. I was systems compliance at Archon until they pushed me out. What do you have?" Sundar asked, getting straight to the point. Elliot reached into a weathered messenger bag and pulled out a small hard drive. He placed it on the table between them like it weighed 100 pounds. "You're about to open a door that can't be shut," Elliot said quietly. "This drive has raw server logs, audio from meetings, even internal chat threads. All proving Ramesh's algorithm was dissected, renamed, and inserted into Cerebra's foundation. And it wasn't just Nathan, he had help. Board members, investors, they all knew the theft wasn't accidental. It was coordinated. Sundar stared at him. Why now? Elliot looked away. Guilt is a strange thing. It keeps you awake at night. I kept telling myself someone else would speak up. But no one ever did. His voice cracked. And then I read about your friend's daughter and how you showed up. He leaned forward. You reminded me what integrity looks like. So, here I am. Sundar took the hard drive. If this is what you say it is, you'll be a key witness in the case. Elliot laughed bitterly. I know. They'll come after me. I prepared for that. He handed over a second envelope. Inside were scanned copies of the same evidence, stored in an encrypted cloud backup. He had contingencies. What happens now? Elliot asked. Sundar stood slowly. Now we let the truth breathe. Hours later, back at the hospital, the surgery had ended. Tara was stable. The doctors reported that the operation was a success. She would need weeks of recovery, but the danger had passed. When Sundar stepped into the room, Ramesh stood up, a mixture of tears and exhaustion in his eyes. She's going to make it, he whispered. Sundar smiled and placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. Yes, and so will you. He then showed Ramesh the hard drive. Someone came forward. Someone who saw everything. You were never wrong, Ramesh. And now we can prove it. Ramesh stared at the device as if it were glowing. Do you know what this means? He asked, voice shaking. Yes, Sundar said. It means you're going to get your name back, your work, your future. That night, Sundar met with Priya and his legal team in a secure conference room. The evidence was reviewed, verified, and prepared for filing. Within hours, a formal lawsuit was launched against Cerebra Technologies for intellectual property theft, fraud, and suppression of whistleblower reports. And as the legal wheels began turning, the story hit the press. A leak possibly from Cerebra itself spread across media outlets like wildfire. CEO Sundar Pichai files billion-dollar lawsuit on behalf of former janitor, alleging AI theft by rival firm. Cerebra's core technology under fire, stolen genius, or corporate betrayal. From hospital bed to courtroom, the real story behind the algorithm that changed the world. As reporters descended upon the hospital, Sundar ensured security was tripled. Priya issued statements on their behalf, carefully controlling the narrative. And through it all, Ramesh stayed by his daughter's side, shielding her from the noise, the cameras, and the chaos. But deep down, he knew something had shifted. He wasn't invisible anymore. His voice was finally being heard. Days later, Sundar received a personal video message from Nathan Cross. Himself. It was short, cold, and clearly defensive. I don't know what kind of stunt you're pulling, Sundar. But this ends badly for you. There's no proof. No court will side with a janitor and some ghost engineer over me. Remember who owns the narrative? Sundar watched the message twice. Then deleted it. He wasn't here for threats. He was here for truth. But just as he was about to rest for the night, Rajiv called again. Sundar, there's something you need to see. He emailed over a leaked video clip. Sundar opened it. It was a grainy recording from 2007. A meeting room, 4 men seated around a table. One of them, Nathan, was standing at a whiteboard, and there, scrawled across the board in messy black marker, were the words, "Our algorithm prototype by R. Ironathan," circled it. "This," he said, green, "is our future." The others nodded. Someone laughed. "But we can't use his name," another said. Nathan shrugged. "Then we won't." Fade to black. Asterisk, the echo of truth. Night after watching the video, Sundar couldn't sleep. He sat alone in the hospital's dimly lit meditation room, a place meant for reflection and peace, but his mind was a storm. The video was undeniable. Not just proof that Ramesh's work had been stolen, but that Nathan and his team had known him, referenced him, erased him. And now, in the final seconds, came something that shifted the ground beneath Sundar's feet. Should we tell Sundar? No, he's too ethical. He'd never agree. The voice that asked the question was still unfamiliar. Someone in the room with Nathan. Someone who had, for a brief second, considered telling him the truth all those years ago. Dot and Nathan, he had made a choice. Not just to steal, but to deliberately keep Sundar out of it, fearing his morality would block the scheme. It was both a twisted compliment and a painful betrayal. Who was that voice? Sundar replayed the clip again and again, analyzing their tone, the inflection, every small pause. He sent the audio to Rajiv, who had forensic audio experts begin isolating the voice. In the meantime, Priya updated him on the legal chaos erupting outside the hospital walls. Headlines filled every major news outlet. Google CEO exposes theft scandal rocking AI industry. Janitors lost genius. Sundar Pichai backs friend in lawsuit that could shake Silicon Valley. Tech titans face reckoning as stolen. Algorithm story gains traction. The response from the public was overwhelming. The world, long enamored by polished CEOs and cutting-edge innovation, suddenly found itself rallying behind a quiet man named Ramesh, a janitor, a father, a forgotten genius. There were interviews, op-eds, and viral posts. Hundreds of engineers and coders began scouring Cerebra's publicly available work, citing uncanny similarities to older academic work traced back to India. Ramesh's name started appearing online next to words like visionary, unrecognized, genius, and the man behind modern AI. Back in the hospital, Tara was recovering well. Her cheeks had color again. Her laugh, soft and shy, returned. And Sundar noticed how Ramesh no longer slouched when he walked, how his eyes met people's. Instead of glancing away, something inside him had begun to heal. But then came the next surprise. Rajiv called with a name. We isolated the voice in the recording, he said. It belongs to Dev Patel. Sundar paused. Dev? Yes. He was part of your early cloud integration team in 2007. Left the company shortly after the Cerebra split. He was on both projects for a time. Now works quietly at a nonprofit, teaching robotics to underprivileged kids in California. Sundar remembered Dev, bright, introverted, loyal to a fault. He'd always admired Dev's ethics, though they rarely spoke outside of work. Get me his number, Sundar said. 2 hours later, Sundar stood outside a modest community robotics center in Oakland. Kids were laughing inside, building small machines out of scrap parts. Dev Patel stepped out, older now, gray at the temples. But his eyes were just as kind. He looked shocked to see Sundar. I didn't expect you to find me, he said quietly. Didn't expect to find you in that video, Sundar replied. They sat on a bench outside, near a mural painted by local students, images of peace. Technology and unity blended together. You knew, Sundar said softly. You were there. Dev nodded. I tried to speak up. They shut me down. Nathan said if I said anything, I'd be blacklisted from the industry. So I left, walked away. Sundar watched him carefully. Why didn't you come to me then? Because I didn't want to hurt you, Dev said. You were building something real, honest. I didn't want this darkness to ruin your name. I thought maybe someday it would come out. And when I saw what you were doing for Ramesh, I knew it was time. He handed Sundar a folder. This is my witness testimony. Signed, notarized. I'm ready. Sundar accepted it with a deep breath. Thank you. Dev, you just changed everything. The trial that followed was one of the most talked about legal battles in recent tech history. Ramesh, wearing a suit Sundar had gifted him, stood before a courtroom packed with media, lawyers, and industry giants. He was nervous, trembling at first, but when he took the stand and told his story, his real story, the room fell silent. He spoke of dreams, of sacrifice, of the thrill of invention, and of the crushing betrayal that followed. The recordings, the files, the testimony from Dev all laid out with precision. Nathan Cross, once the golden boy of AI, sat stone-faced, his lawyers scrambling to discredit the evidence, but it was a losing battle. Public opinion had already shifted, and When Dev took the stand and confirmed the events of 2007, even the jury looked shaken in the final verdict. The court ruled in favor of Ramesh. This court recognizes Ramesh Iyer as the original creator of the recursive adaptive learning algorithm known commercially as the Cerebral Core. The damages awarded were historic hundreds of millions in compensation, stock reallocations, and public acknowledgments. But for Ramesh, the money wasn't the victory. The real victory was his name restored, honored remembered a year later. Sundar and Ramesh stood on stage together at an international tech symposium. Tara sat in the front row, smiling, healthy, clutching a small plush robot she'd built herself. Sundar took the mic. Today, he said, we're not just celebrating innovation, we're celebrating justice. And the reminder that genius can come from any corner of the world, from any walk of life, and it deserves to be seen. He turned to Ramesh